The morning air in Pine Hollow carried that crisp, golden bite of early autumn, the kind that hinted at harvests and long nights by the fire. From his ranch porch, Cole Matthews surveyed the rolling fields spread beneath a sky the color of tarnished silver. The cattle were restless, the air cool, and the leaves burning with shades of amber and red. It should have been the perfect morning for a man like him, steady, simple, predictable. But instead, Cole felt the weight of something heavier than the season itself: loneliness. Ever since his wife, Hannah, passed away 3 years ago, life had fallen into a quiet rhythm of work and duty. Sunrise meant chores, sunset meant exhaustion, and in between, he filled the silences with the clinking of tools and the soft murmur of his daughter's laughter echoing from the house. Lily, 8 years old, had become his entire world. Still, there were moments, especially when the evenings grew long, when he felt the ache of solitude pressing against his ribs. That morning, his friend and ranch hand, Mick, pulled up in a dusty pickup and leaned out the window, grinning. "Don't forget about the harvest gala this weekend," Mick said. "Whole town's going, and before you say it, you're not backing out this year," Cole scowled. "Ain't exactly my kind of thing, Mick. Fancy clothes and small talk don't help the cattle." Mick chuckled, tapping his hat. "Maybe not, but it might help your heart. You can't keep living like you're a ghost, buddy. Take someone, have some fun. That new woman at the cafe, Grace something, she's nice. Go ask her." Cole shook his head, half amused, half annoyed. "I barely know her. She's new in town." "All the better," Mick said, driving off with a honk. "Fresh start for both of you." That idea stayed with Cole longer than he'd like to admit. Grace Turner. He'd seen her around a few times at Millie's Cafe, where she worked part-time while settling in. She had a gentle way of speaking, soft-spoken but confident. There was something in her smile, quiet strength maybe, that reminded him of Hannah. But different too. Grace didn't fill a silence with chatter. She let it breathe, like someone who had known both peace and pain. Later that afternoon, after dropping Lily off at school, Cole found himself in the cafe again. Grace was behind the counter, arranging slices of pumpkin pie in the display case. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and freshly brewed coffee. "Morning, Mr. Matthews," she greeted, looking up with a polite smile. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Morning." Cole's fine." "All right then, Cole," she said, still smiling. "What'll it be today?" He opened his mouth to order coffee, but the words that came out surprised even him. "You wouldn't happen to be free Saturday night, would you?" Her brow lifted slightly. "Saturday." "The Harvest Gala," he said quickly, trying to sound casual. "They say it's more fun when you're not the only one sitting alone." Grace blinked, clearly taken off guard. For a moment she looked uncertain, then a faint blush colored her cheeks. "That's sudden, only asking for one night," he said gently. "A friendly favor, I guess." "No pressure." She studied him for a long moment. Something in his eyes, honesty maybe, softened her hesitation. "All right," she said finally. "One night," Cole nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Appreciate it." As he left the cafe, the autumn wind tugged at his coat, carrying the faint scent of coffee and apple pie. He hadn't expected to ask anyone. He certainly hadn't expected her to say yes. But for the first time in a long while, there was a flicker of something new inside. Him, anticipation. He didn't know that his simple request would change everything, that the woman he'd just asked out for one night would soon stand at the front of his daughter's classroom, holding more of his future than he could possibly imagine. The morning sunlight poured through the curtains of Grace Turner's small, rented cottage, falling across open boxes, lesson plans, and half-folded laundry. It was barely 6:30, and the kettle on her stove was just beginning to whistle. She moved through her kitchen with a quiet purpose. The rhythm of her mornings, something she had mastered in the last few weeks since moving to Pine Hollow, Montana, a small town she'd chosen precisely because it was far from everything she'd known. Grace had come here to start over. Her old life, a crowded city, a failed engagement, and years of stress was behind her now. When her fiancé had broken things off just months before their wedding, claiming he wasn't ready for forever, it had shattered her confidence. She'd spent too long feeling like she wasn't enough, for him, for the life she thought she'd built. So when an opening appeared for a third-grade teaching position in a quiet mountain town, she packed her car, left behind her apartment and the noise of her past, and drove toward peace. Still, peace was a fragile thing. Her first few weeks in Pine Hollow had been a mixture of kindness and curiosity. The locals were friendly but reserved, and small-town eyes missed nothing. Grace worked part-time at Millie's Cafe, helping cover bills until her school job officially began. It was there, in that cozy cafe filled with the smell of cinnamon rolls and laughter, that she met Cole Matthews, the rugged, quiet rancher whose eyes seemed to hold both warmth and distance. When he asked her to the harvest gala, she almost said no. After all, she didn't know him beyond polite conversation and the way he always tipped generously without saying much. But there had been something gentle about the way he asked. Not pushy, not flirtatious, just honest. And she hadn't realized how much she'd missed being seen like that even for a moment. So, against her cautious instincts, she'd said yes. Now, 2 days after that invitation, Grace sat at her kitchen table reviewing the class roster for her new students. 24 names were neatly typed on the paper in front of her, and she practiced reading them aloud. Ethan Brooks, Ava Carter, Mason Lee. Her eyes trailed down the list. Lily Matthews. The name gave her pause for no reason she could quite explain. There was something sweet about it, old-fashioned and gentle, like a name from a storybook. She smiled, imagining the little girl behind it, wondering what kind of student she'd be. Grace had always loved teaching. Children had a way of cutting through life's noise with their honesty and wonder. They made her forget her own heartbreak. And in this new town, among new faces, she hoped her classroom would become her safe place, a world of bright crayons, soft laughter, and little hands reaching for help with math problems. Later that afternoon, she stopped by the general store to pick up a few supplies for her classroom. As she reached for a stack of notebooks, the cashier, Mrs. Greeley, looked up with a knowing smile. "You're the new teacher at Pine Hollow Elementary, aren't you?" Grace nodded politely. "That's right. Starting Monday," Mrs. Greeley's eyes twinkled. "Well, bless you. Those kids could use someone fresh. My niece's little girl, Lily Matthews, is in your class. Sweet thing, that one. Her daddy's Cole Matthews, runs the big ranch out west." Grace's heart skipped a beat at the name. "Cole Matthews?" she repeated quietly. "The very same," Mrs. Greeley confirmed. "You probably met him by now. Hard to miss a man like that around here." Grace smiled faintly, pretending to be calm. "I suppose I have," but as she drove home later, the realization settled over her like a slow burn. The man she'd agreed to go on a date with was the father of one of her soon-to-be students. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, her mind racing. What would people think? What would he think once he realized? Should she cancel? No, that would be rude, and maybe it was just one night. Surely it wouldn't matter. Still, as the sun sank behind the hills and the golden light spilled over the fields, Grace couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that her fresh start was about to get complicated. She told herself it was just coincidence, just one night, just a harmless favor. But deep down, in that quiet corner of her heart that still believed in fate, she couldn't help wondering if Pine Hollow and the man named Cole Matthews had been waiting for her all along. The night of the harvest gala arrived wrapped in crisp autumn air and the scent of pine drifting down from the hills. The town of Pine Hollow had transformed its community hall into something out of a postcard. Strings of golden lights twinkling across the ceiling, hay bales lined with quilts, and tables laden with homemade pies and cider. It was the kind of event that made small towns feel alive, where laughter filled the air and everyone seemed to know everyone else's story, except for Grace Turner, who stood outside the entrance clutching her shawl, feeling like she might be walking into a dream or a mistake. She had almost canceled that morning. After realizing that Cole Matthews, her one-night date, was the father of one of her soon-to-be students, guilt had gnawed at her all day. But she reminded herself of two things. First, the school year hadn't started yet, and second, this wasn't a romantic evening. It was just a friendly outing. A simple favor. That's what she told herself, at least. Then Cole appeared, striding across the gravel in a clean white shirt, dark jeans, and a charcoal vest that fit him a little too well. His hat tilted low, and a warm smile softened the rugged lines of his face. Grace caught her breath before she could stop herself. "Evening, Miss Turner," he said, stopping in front of her. "Didn't think you'd actually show." She laughed lightly, adjusting her shawl. "Neither did I." He chuckled, offering his arm with an easy politeness she hadn't expected. "Shall we then?" Inside, the place glowed with warmth and chatter. The fiddles and guitars filled the air with a lively tune. Couples swayed on the dance floor, and the smell of roasted apples drifted from the buffet table. Cole led Grace to a corner where a few of his ranching friends sat, and she immediately felt the curious gazes of a few townsfolk on her. Small towns had a way of noticing everything. Cole noticed too. "Don't mind them," he murmured, leaning close. "They're just surprised I didn't bring my tractor as a date this year." Grace laughed, tension melting away. "I feel better already." As the evening went on, conversation flowed easier than either expected. Cole told her stories about life on the ranch, how his daughter, Lily, had once tried to help him fix a fence by painting the cows blue. Grace laughed so hard she nearly spilled her cider. In turn, she told him about her students from her previous school, how children always managed to surprise her with their honesty and kindness. When the slow music began, Cole hesitated, then stood and held out his hand. "You dance?" "Poorly," she confessed. "Then we'll match." He guided her onto the floor, his hand gentle but steady at her waist. The world around them seemed to soften, the music fading into a slow hum, the flicker of lights painting everything gold. Grace found herself looking up at him, at the small crinkle near his eyes when he smiled. It was a face marked by loss, yes, but also by quiet strength. For a few minutes, she forgot about her new job, about her past, about all the rules she'd made to protect herself. She just danced. When the song ended, neither moved right away. The air between them shimmered with something unspoken, something fragile and alive. Cole cleared his throat, his voice low. "You make a man forget a few things, Grace Turner." She smiled softly. "That might not be such a bad thing." As the night wound down, they walked outside beneath a blanket of stars. The laughter from inside the hall faded into the distance, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the soft rustle of wind through the trees. "Thank you," Grace said quietly. "For tonight, thank you," he replied. "Didn't know how much I needed it." They stood for a moment in the cool night air, just looking at each other. There was no kiss, no promises, just a lingering warmth neither of them wanted to end. As Cole drove her home, Grace stared out the window, heart both light and uneasy. She didn't know that this one simple evening, this harmless, one-day date, was about to entangle their lives in ways neither could have predicted. Tomorrow, when she stepped into her classroom and called roll for the first time, she would hear the name Lily Matthews, and everything would change. Monday morning arrived wrapped in the soft chill of early autumn. The golden leaves outside Pine Hollow Elementary fluttered in the wind, scattering across the schoolyard as children laughed and chased each other before the first bell. For Grace Turner, it was her first official day as a teacher in this new town, a day she had looked forward to with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. She stood at her classroom door, her heart beating fast but steady. The room was bright and cheerful, decorated with colorful charts, storybooks, and name tags she had spent the weekend arranging. She wanted her students to walk in and feel safe, welcome, and curious. After all, this classroom was her new beginning. Grace smoothed her floral blouse and glanced one more time at her attendance sheet. Lily Matthews. The name caught her attention again, though she still couldn't say why. Maybe it was just because it sounded so pretty, like something that belonged in a storybook. The bell rang, and within moments, her quiet classroom became a swirl of voices, backpacks, and laughter. One by one, her students found their seats, wide-eyed and chatty, until only a few were left trickling in. Grace smiled warmly as she called the roll, her voice calm and clear. "Ethan Brooks?" "Here. Ava Carter?" "Present." "Lily Matthews?" A sweet, high-pitched voice chirped, "Here!" Grace looked up and froze. There, sitting in the third row with a braid tied in a pink ribbon, was a little girl with bright hazel eyes and a familiar smile. It was a smile she had seen just 2 nights ago, shining up from a photograph in Cole Matthews' wallet when he'd shown her his daughter during the gala. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to tilt. Lily was his daughter. Grace's breath caught in her throat. The realization hit her like a gust of cold wind. She had gone on a date, an entire beautiful evening, with one of her students' parents. Not just any parent either, but the father of the sweet little girl now waving at her, completely unaware of the storm gathering behind her teacher's polite smile. "Welcome, Lily," Grace managed to say, forcing her voice to sound steady. Lily grinned, her eyes bright with innocence. "Your daddy's date from the party," she said cheerfully, loud enough for half the class to hear. A ripple of giggles ran through the room. Grace's cheeks burned crimson. "All right, everyone," she said quickly, clapping her hands to redirect their attention. "Let's get started with a name game." But inside her heart was pounding. The morning passed in a blur. Grace taught phonics, read stories, and guided little hands through art projects, all while trying not to think about how the situation might look from the outside. What would Cole think when he realized his daughter's new teacher was the same woman he'd danced with beneath the harvest lights? What if the principal found out? Would it seem unprofessional, inappropriate, even scandalous? By lunchtime, Grace felt exhausted, her smile brittle around the edges. She sat at her desk, pretending to grade papers while her mind replayed the moment Lily had said those words. Then she heard small footsteps approach. "Miss Turner?" Grace looked up to see Lily standing there, holding a paper heart she'd cut out during art time. "This is for you," the girl said shyly. "Daddy says you like pretty things." Grace's throat tightened. "That's very kind of you, Lily." "Thank you." The little girl beamed. "Daddy said you're nice," and with that, she skipped away, leaving Grace staring after her, torn between laughter and disbelief. That evening, as she locked up her classroom, Grace stood by the window watching the sun dip low behind the pines. She knew she couldn't avoid Cole forever. He'd come to pick up his daughter sooner or later, and when he did, there would be no pretending anymore. Their one harmless evening had suddenly become complicated, and though she dreaded the awkwardness, part of her heart fluttered, because deep down, she knew that fate had played a hand in this strange twist. Tomorrow, she would face him again. And whatever happened next would shape not only her job, but the fragile beginnings of something she hadn't dared to hope for: love. The school bell rang, releasing a flood of children into the crisp afternoon air. The sound of laughter, sneakers scuffing on pavement, and parents calling out names filled the front yard of Pine Hollow Elementary. Grace Turner stood by her classroom window, her pulse quickening with each passing minute. She knew this moment was coming. Cole Matthews would arrive any second to pick up his daughter. She had spent the entire day rehearsing what she might say if they met. Maybe she'd apologize for the misunderstanding. Maybe she'd laugh it off. But deep down, she wasn't sure how to handle it. She was his daughter's teacher now. That changed everything. Outside, a familiar figure appeared, broad-shouldered, in a worn denim jacket, walking with an easy confidence. Cole, even from a distance, he stood out, like someone who belonged to the land itself. Lily spotted him first, squealing with delight. "Daddy!" Cole's face softened as he crouched to hug her. Then, as Lily pointed toward the school doors, Grace's stomach tightened. He looked up, following his daughter's finger. Their eyes met. For a long second, neither moved. Then Cole exhaled a quiet, almost incredulous laugh and started walking toward her. Grace straightened, heart hammering, forcing a professional smile onto her face. "Afternoon, Miss Turner," he said, the corners of his mouth twitching with amusement. "Or should I say Grace?" "Mr. Matthews," she replied, matching his tone but failing to hide her embarrassment. "I suppose we're officially meeting again," he chuckled softly. "Guess fate's got a funny sense of humor." Grace's cheeks flushed, though she couldn't help smiling. "I swear I didn't know Lily was your daughter. Her name was on my list, but, well, I didn't connect the dots," Cole shrugged, good-natured. "No harm done. I didn't exactly mention I had a daughter that night either." Thought I'd spare you the dad talk. That made her laugh, easing some of the tension. Still, she felt the weight of her position pressing down. I just hope this doesn't make things awkward, for Lily, I mean. Or for you. Awkward? He teased lightly. Only if you make it awkward. Grace blinked, caught off guard by his easy tone. I'm serious, Cole. I don't want to cross any boundaries. You're a parent, and I'm her teacher. The last thing I need is gossip or— He lifted a hand gently, stopping her. Grace, you've got nothing to worry about. We went to one dance. Folks around here might talk, sure, but they talk about everyone. Let 'em. His calm, grounded confidence made her relax a little. Still, it's unexpected, she admitted. He smiled softly, eyes warm. Yeah, but maybe unexpected ain't always bad. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken things. Lily ran up then, clutching her backpack. Daddy, Miss Turner says I read really well. She beamed. Cole grinned, glancing at Grace. That right? Looks like I got a smart one. She's bright and curious, Grace said warmly, crouching to Lily's level. You've done a wonderful job raising her. The compliment seemed to surprise him. His gaze softened, and for a fleeting second, his eyes revealed something deeper. Loneliness, gratitude, maybe even longing. Thank you, he murmured. As they left, Grace stood in the doorway, watching them walk away hand in hand. Lily skipped beside her father, chatting about art class and recess, while Cole occasionally glanced back just once, as if torn between leaving and saying something more. When they disappeared around the corner, Grace let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something entirely different, an ache she couldn't name. That night, as she graded papers by the soft glow of her lamp, Grace's mind kept drifting back to the way Cole had looked at her. Gentle, steady, almost as if he saw her not just as a teacher or a fleeting dance partner, but as someone who had quietly stepped into his life for a reason. She told herself it didn't matter. They were just two people whose paths had crossed at the wrong time. Nothing more. But the truth she couldn't admit, even to herself, was that something had already begun to change. And no matter how much she tried to keep it professional, her heart had started to notice him. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. School mornings, lessons, laughter, and the kind of small-town normalcy Grace Turner had longed for. Yet beneath that calm surface, something new was beginning to take root. Every day brought another unexpected encounter with Cole Matthews, and each one seemed to chip away at the invisible wall she'd tried to keep between them. It started innocently enough. A forgotten lunchbox, a permission slip that needed signing, little moments where Cole would appear at her classroom door just as the last student left, his presence filling the space in a way that made Grace's pulse skip. Miss Turner, he'd greet her formally, though the teasing glint in his eyes betrayed him. Mr. Matthews, she'd reply, matching his smile. The first real conversation happened one Friday afternoon. Lily had stayed behind to finish a drawing, a bright picture of her father on his horse, leading a herd of cattle under a sky full of stars. Grace watched quietly, touched by the little girl's attention to detail. When Cole arrived, he paused at the doorway, watching his daughter with pride softening his rugged features. She's always been more of an artist than a ranch hand, he said quietly. Grace smiled. She's got imagination. That's just as valuable. Cole leaned against the doorframe, his hat in his hands. Hard to remember that sometimes. I keep trying to teach her about fence mending and saddle oil, but she'd rather draw the horses than ride them. Maybe she'll grow up to paint them instead, Grace offered. He chuckled. Wouldn't surprise me. Lily finished her drawing and rushed to show him. Look, Daddy, I made you taller this time, Cole laughed, scooping her into a hug. Guess I should thank Miss Turner for making me look good in all your art. Grace blushed, pretending to busy herself with papers. All credit goes to the artist. Moments like that became frequent, simple, fleeting, yet full of warmth. Grace told herself it was just the natural closeness of a teacher and a parent working together for a child's sake. But deep down, she knew it was more. She began to notice things, how his voice softened when he spoke to Lily, how his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he always made sure Grace didn't have to lift heavy boxes or stay late at the school alone. He never said much, but his quiet gestures spoke volumes. One afternoon, after a long day of grading and staff meetings, Grace found her car wouldn't start. The battery had died. She stood in the parking lot, frustrated, when a familiar pickup truck rolled up beside her. "Need a hand?" Cole called out through the open window. Grace sighed, half laughing. "Do you just magically appear whenever I'm in trouble?" "Guess I've got good timing," he said, hopping out and grabbing jumper cables. Pop the hood. As the engine hummed back to life, Grace thanked him, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "You've saved me twice now," she said. "First at the dance, now this." He gave a small shrug, his tone gentle. "Maybe I just like being around when you need help." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to still. No school, no students, no rules. Just two people standing under a fading Montana sunset, the light spilling gold across their faces. Then Lily's voice called from the truck. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" Cole smiled, stepping back. "Duty calls," he said, tipping his hat. "See you tomorrow, Miss Turner." Grace watched them drive away, a faint ache tugging at her chest. She'd come to Pine Hollow to start over, to heal, to keep her life simple. But life, especially life in a small town, had a way of intertwining paths that weren't meant to stay separate. By the time she went to bed that night, she couldn't deny it anymore. Every meeting, every shared smile, every kind word was slowly, quietly weaving something stronger between them. And even if neither dared to say it yet, their hearts were already beginning to fall into step, just like a pair of dancers finding their rhythm all over again. By the time October rolled into Pine Hollow, the crisp air had turned sharp with the scent of wood smoke, and whispers seemed to drift through the town just as easily as falling leaves. Grace Turner had learned quickly that Pine Hollow wasn't just small, it was watchful. People noticed everything, who bought extra coffee at Millie's Cafe, who changed their curtains, and especially who lingered a little too long with the town's most eligible widower. At first, the talk was innocent. A few parents chuckled about how Miss Turner and Cole Matthews made such a fine-looking pair. Then the remarks grew bolder, half-jokes laced with curiosity. Grace heard snippets in the teacher's lounge, at the grocery store, even whispered by a group of mothers waiting. In the pickup line, I heard she was his date at the Harvest Gala. Maybe she's trying to catch herself a rancher. Must be hard to stay professional when the father looks like that. Each word stung a little deeper. Grace had worked too hard to earn respect in her new town to have it chipped away by gossip she couldn't control. She'd come here to start fresh, to build a quiet, simple life. And yet every kind smile from Cole, every shared glance, was now fuel for the rumor mill. It wasn't just idle chatter anymore. Grace began noticing how some parents hesitated when speaking to her, how a few fellow teachers gave her tight, knowing smiles. Even Principal Harper gently pulled her aside one morning. "You're doing an excellent job, Grace," the principal said kindly. "But small towns, well, people talk. Best to keep things strictly professional with Mr. Matthews, for your sake and Lily's." Grace nodded, her heart sinking. "Of course," she said softly. "I understand." That afternoon she decided to avoid Cole, at least for a while. She'd focus on teaching, keep things formal, and maybe the talk would fade. But Pine Hollow was too small for distance. 2 days later, as Grace carried boxes of new books from her car to the classroom, she heard his voice behind her. "You shouldn't be lifting all that alone." She froze, then turned, forcing a polite smile. "Mr. Matthews, I'm fine, really." He frowned at her tone. "Mr. Matthews? That's new," she sighed, looking away. "Cole, I just think it's better if we keep things clear. People are talking." His jaw tightened slightly. "About us?" She nodded, embarrassed. "I don't want anyone thinking I'm crossing a line with a student's parent. You know how this looks." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped closer, voice low but steady. "Grace, let me ask you something. Why let a bunch of folks who don't know us decide how we live?" "Because my job depends on it," she replied quietly. "You've built your life here, your reputation. I'm still earning mine." He studied her, the hard lines of his face softening. "You've got nothing to prove to anyone. You're good at what you do. And as for the talk, let 'em talk. I've dealt with worse." But Grace shook her head. It's not that simple. You can shrug it off. I can't. They stood in the quiet hallway, the tension thick between them. Finally, Cole gave a slow nod. All right, if distance is what you need, I'll give it to you. But for the record, I don't give a damn what people say. His honesty caught her off guard. There was no bitterness in his voice, only a quiet conviction that made her heart ache. Later that evening, she watched from her window as his truck passed by the school road, Lily's laughter echoing faintly from the back seat. Grace pressed a hand to her chest, whispering to herself, "This is the right thing." It has to be. But even as she said it, her heart argued otherwise. She missed the warmth in his voice, the easy calm he brought to her days. And though she told herself to let it go, a part of her knew Pine Hollow's whispers weren't strong enough to drown out what was already growing between them. Because gossip was just noise. What she felt for Cole Matthews, steady, gentle, and real, was something deeper. And no rumor in the world could silence that for long. The first snow dusted Pine Hollow like powdered sugar, coating rooftops and fence posts in soft white. Christmas was still weeks away, but the air already carried that quiet, expectant hush that came with winter. The kind of stillness that made every sound feel sharper, every emotion more tender. For Grace Turner, the last few weeks had been difficult. She had kept her promise to maintain distance from Cole Matthews, keeping their interactions polite and professional. At parent meetings, she spoke to him with the same warmth she offered every other parent, careful never to linger too long or smile too much. It wasn't easy. Every time their eyes met, a flicker of something unspoken passed between them, something that neither dared to name. Grace told herself she was doing the right thing. She had a duty to protect her job, her reputation, and most of all, her students. But sometimes, when the school hallways grew quiet, she missed the easy laughter they used to share, the warmth of his steady presence. One snowy afternoon, while her class was finishing a craft project, paper snowflakes and cotton ball snowmen, Grace heard soft footsteps at her desk. When she looked up, Lily Matthews stood there holding a folded piece of paper. "What's this, sweetheart?" Grace asked gently. "It's a letter," Lily said, eyes bright. "For Santa, but I don't think he can fix it." Grace smiled kindly. "You never know. Santa's full of surprises." Lily hesitated, then unfolded the paper. In her neat, careful handwriting were the words, "Dear Santa, I don't want toys this year. I just want my daddy to smile again." Grace's breath caught. Her throat tightened as Lily went on softly. "He doesn't smile like he used to. Except that one night after the dance. That's when he looked happy. He talked about you a lot after that." Grace froze. "He did?" Lily nodded, her small voice full of trust. "He said you made him laugh again. I think you should come over and have dinner with us. Maybe then he'll smile more." For a moment, Grace didn't know what to say. The sweetness of the child's words tugged at something deep inside her. But she forced herself to answer carefully. "That's a very kind wish, Lily. But your daddy and I are just friends. And sometimes grown-ups have to be careful about how much time they spend together." Lily frowned, clearly unhappy with that answer. "That sounds silly. If someone makes you smile, you should see them." Grace couldn't help but laugh softly. "You might be right about that." That night, Grace couldn't stop thinking about the letter. She imagined Cole sitting by the fire in his ranch house, tired from work, staring at the empty chair across from him. She could almost hear the sound of Lily's laughter echoing down the hall. And for a moment, she wished she could be there too, sharing cocoa, helping with homework, being part of their quiet little world. The next afternoon, after school, she saw Cole waiting by his truck as usual. Lily skipped ahead of him, waving her snowflake ornament in the air. "Miss Turner, look what I made." Grace smiled, crouching to admire it. "It's beautiful, Lily." Cole approached, his hands stuffed in his coat pockets. "She's been talking about that thing all morning," he said with a chuckle. Their eyes met briefly, and Grace's heart ached. She wanted to tell him about the letter, about Lily's wish, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she handed Lily her backpack and said softly, "You've got a very special little girl." Cole's gaze softened. "Yeah," he murmured. "She's got her mom's heart." The wind picked up, scattering snow around their feet. Lily climbed into the truck, humming to herself, leaving them alone for a moment. "I hear she's been writing letters to Santa," Grace said, her voice light but trembling. He smiled faintly. That so? Grace nodded, meeting his eyes. Maybe she just wants her dad to smile again. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, sadness, hope. Then maybe I should start trying harder, he said quietly. As they parted ways, Grace felt something shift inside her. The walls she had built began to crack just a little. Because maybe Lily was right. Maybe life was too short to let fear or gossip decide who deserved happiness. And maybe, just maybe, a little girl's Christmas wish was the push two hearts needed to find their way back to each other. The days after Lily's Christmas wish felt heavier for both Grace Turner and Cole Matthews. The snow deepened, blanketing Pine Hollow in silence, but inside, tension brewed, quiet, persistent, and painful. It started when Grace's principal, Mrs. Harper, called her into the office. The woman's tone was polite but sharp, her words carefully chosen. "Grace, you know I value your work. You've brought such heart to this school, but some of the parents are concerned." Grace's stomach tightened. Concerned about what? Mrs. Harper sighed, folding her hands on the desk. About your relationship with Mr. Matthews. Word spreads fast here, and a few have begun to question your professionalism. They're suggesting favoritism toward Lily. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. That's not true. I treat Lily like every other student. I know that, Mrs. Harper said quickly. But perception matters as much as truth in a small town. I'd advise you to be careful. No personal contact with Mr. Matthews outside of school. For now, Grace nodded stiffly, her throat tight. She wanted to defend herself, to insist that there was nothing improper between them. But she also knew that arguing would only make it worse. When she left the office, her hands were trembling. By the time she got home that night, anger replaced the fear. How could people twist something so pure? She and Cole had barely spoken outside of parent meetings, and yet somehow the town had made it a scandal. She tried to tell herself it didn't matter. But when she saw Cole the next afternoon at school pickup, the words came tumbling out. "Cole, we can't talk like this anymore," she said, keeping her voice low but firm. Mrs. Harper called me in. "People think—" "I know what they think," he interrupted, his tone quiet but edged with frustration. "Lily told me some of the parents have been whispering. You shouldn't have to take the fall for something that isn't even real." Grace shook her head, her eyes stinging. "It doesn't matter what's real. It matters what they believe. And right now they believe I've crossed a line." Cole's jaw tightened. "So what? You're just going to walk away because of a few busybodies?" Her voice broke slightly. "It's not that simple. You can ignore gossip, but I can lose my job, Cole." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression softening with understanding and hurt. "I never wanted to make your life harder," he said quietly. "You didn't." But the silence that followed said otherwise. That night, Grace sat by her window, staring out at the darkened ranch lights in the distance. She thought about the harvest gala, about the way Cole had looked at her as if she were the only woman in the room. She thought about Lily's letter to Santa and the warmth that had filled her chest when she read it. And she wondered how something that had felt so good, so right, had become so impossible. At the same time, Cole was pacing in his barn, the scent of hay and pine thick in the cold air. He hated the town's talk. He hated that Grace was being punished for his reputation, for being seen as the lonely rancher who'd finally found someone to thaw his grief. For years, Cole had lived with loss quietly, never daring to want more. Grace had changed that, but now his wanting had consequences. The next day, when he arrived at the school, Grace barely looked at him. She smiled for Lily, waved politely, and walked away. The message was clear. Whatever they had shared, whatever might have been, was over. That night, he sat on the porch steps, staring at the snowy fields stretching out beneath the stars. Lily came out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, climbing into his lap. "Did I make a bad wish?" He swallowed hard, wrapping his arms around her. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "You just wished for something real." Sometimes real things take time, but as the wind howled across the frozen plains, Cole couldn't help but wonder if time was the one thing they had just run out of. The week before Christmas arrived, wrapping Pine Hollow in stillness. The snow lay deep across the fields, glittering under the soft glow of lanterns and string lights. But for Grace Turner, the beauty of the season felt dim. She went through the motions at school, directing the Christmas play, handing out report cards, smiling for the children, but her heart felt hollow. Ever since that last talk with Cole Matthews, she'd buried herself in work. She told herself she was doing the right thing, protecting her career, avoiding more gossip, but it didn't make the loneliness any easier. She missed his laugh, his quiet strength, the way his eyes softened whenever he looked at her. On the last day before winter break, the school hosted a small holiday concert. Parents filled the gym, cameras flashing as the children sang. Grace stood at the back, her hands clasped, scanning the crowd automatically. And then she saw him. Cole stood near the doors, snow still dusting his hat and shoulders. Lily sat on his lap, grinning at the stage. Grace's heart twisted. He hadn't seen her yet, but she could tell from the look on his face, soft, proud, tired, that he'd been through the same ache she had. When the concert ended, Grace tried to slip out quietly, but Lily spotted her. "Miss Turner," the girl cried, running over. "You have to see our tree at the ranch. Daddy and I decorated it ourselves." Cole approached behind her, hat in hand. "Lily," he said gently, "I'm sure Miss Turner's got plans." Grace hesitated. She wanted to refuse, to keep her distance, but when she looked into Lily's eager eyes, she couldn't. "Maybe I can stop by," she said softly. "Just for a few minutes." That evening, Grace drove out to the Matthews Ranch. The sky was streaked with violet and gold, the snow crunching under her tires. When she stepped inside, warmth rushed over her, the scent of pine and cinnamon, the soft glow of a fire, the sound of Lily humming as she placed another ornament on the tree. Cole stood by the mantel, looking both surprised and relieved to see her. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," she admitted, taking in the cozy living room. "But I figured I owed someone a look at that famous tree," Lily beamed. "Isn't it pretty?" "It's perfect," Grace said. When Lily ran off to grab Coco, the air between Grace and Cole grew still. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, Grace broke the silence. "Cole, I'm sorry for how things ended. I didn't know how to handle everything. The gossip, the pressure, it scared me." He nodded slowly. "I get it. You've worked hard for everything you have. I never wanted to put that at risk." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "But I realized something. I've been letting other people's opinions decide what I'm allowed to want. And that's no way to live." His gaze met hers, warm and searching. "And what do you want, Grace?" She swallowed hard. You and Lily. The life that feels right, even if it's complicated." For a moment, neither moved. Then he reached out, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. "You sure about that? Pine Hollow's got a long memory," Grace smiled faintly. "Then let them remember the truth, that two people found something worth fighting for." Cole's eyes softened. He stepped closer, his voice low. "I've been waiting to hear that for a long time." Before either could say more, Lily came bounding back, holding 3 mugs of cocoa. "Miss Turner, Daddy put marshmallows in yours," she chirped. Grace laughed, taking the mug, her eyes meeting Cole's over the rim. The tension between them melted into quiet joy, simple, real, and warm. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and steady. Inside, the ranch felt alive, with laughter, with light, with the kind of love that didn't need words. That night, as Grace drove home under the falling snow, she realized something profound. Happiness didn't come from silence or approval. It came from courage, from choosing to love, even when it wasn't easy. And when she looked in her rearview mirror and saw Cole and Lily waving from the porch, she knew her heart had finally found its home in Pine Hollow.